The rain fell in thin silver threads, streaking the city streets with a cold, ghostly light. Neon signs flickered in puddles, and the hum of distant traffic merged with the low, haunting notes of a saxophone playing somewhere far away. The city never truly slept. It thrived on secrets, whispered deals, and the kind of power that could make a man both feared and respected in equal measure. Inside the Crimson Lantern, a tavern tucked between narrow alleyways and high, shadowed buildings, warmth and smoke created a sanctuary from the storm. The smell of roasted coffee, bread, and sizzling food mingled with the tang of alcohol and tobacco. Patrons leaned over tables, speaking in low tones, while others huddled near the bar, laughing or arguing over cards and small bets. Among them moved Alara, a young woman with eyes that seemed too sharp for a place like this. She carried trays with practiced grace, balancing dishes and drinks with a calm, effortless skill. Her hair, dark as midnight, was tied neatly behind her head, and her movements were precise, almost mechanical. But there was a quiet fire in her gaze. Every patron saw her efficiency, but none could claim her attention. Except one. The tavern door swung open, letting in a rush of wind and rain. A hush fell over the crowd for a moment, not out of fear alone, but out of respect for the man who stepped in. Darian Moretti, the Mafia boss, whose name alone could make the city's powerful shiver, entered like a shadow taking shape. His presence demanded attention. Broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in black, with eyes that held both charm and danger, he was the kind of man who could control a room without saying a word. Alara noticed him immediately. Her pulse quickened slightly, not from fear, but from the awareness that someone like Darian Moretti could be dangerous in ways beyond simple violence. Many had tried to win his favor, some through flattery, others through quiet compliance. Yet she continued to serve other tables with the same careful detachment, ignoring the gaze that lingered on her from across the room. Darian watched her move, fascinated. It was rare to encounter someone who didn't falter in his presence, who didn't instinctively bow or smile out of fear or greed. The usual charm that worked on everyone else seemed to falter here, replaced by a subtle tension that intrigued him. He settled into a corner booth, ordering a single glass of whiskey. His eyes never left Alara, following her every movement, noting the way she carried herself with quiet authority. She approached a table nearby, delivering a plate with careful precision, and her gaze slid past him without hesitation. The night stretched on, filled with small encounters and subtle tests. Patrons spoke in murmurs, occasionally glancing at the powerful man in the corner, but Alara treated him as if he were invisible. Darian found himself enjoying the challenge. There was a dangerous thrill in a person refusing to bend before him. It was rare, almost unheard of. A few hours later, tension rippled through the tavern. A rival gang member entered, eyes glinting with hostility. Whispers spread like wildfire. The man walked straight toward Darian, a smirk curling his lips. He had planned to make a statement, to remind everyone that Darian's power could be challenged. Before the confrontation could escalate, Alara stepped forward. Calmly, without fear, she moved between the two men. Her voice was steady and clear, though firm enough to command attention. "Enough," she said. "He doesn't want trouble tonight. Neither should you." The rival faltered, thrown off by her boldness. A tense moment stretched. Darian's hand hovered near his coat pocket, where he always kept his options ready. But he didn't move. He simply observed, intrigued by her courage. Finally, the rival backed down, muttering under his breath as he left the tavern. Patrons watched in awe, whispering among themselves. Alara returned to her work without a word, but Darian's interest had shifted from curiosity to something more intense. He had seen courage before, but not like this, quiet, controlled, and unwavering. As the night drew toward its peak, the tavern emptied slowly, leaving behind the lingering scent of smoke and roasted coffee. Elara wiped down tables with methodical care, unaware that Darian had risen from his seat and approached her silently. "Why do you ignore me?" he asked, his voice low, smooth, yet carrying an edge of amusement. Elara paused, glancing at him briefly. "I'm busy," she replied simply, returning her attention to the table she was cleaning. Darian chuckled, a sound that was both soft and commanding. "I like that," he said. "Most people fall over themselves just to get my attention. Not you. You resist." Elara said nothing. She finished her task and walked toward the kitchen, leaving him standing in the middle of the floor. Darian watched her go, his mind turning over the implications of her defiance. It was more than arrogance or pride. There was strength there, discipline, perhaps even a hint of tragedy. He could feel it in the way she moved, in the shadows in her eyes. Later, when the last patrons had left and the tavern was nearly silent, he leaned against the counter, watching her clean. "You serve everyone else so well," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you avoid me. Why?" Elara met his gaze for a brief second. In that moment, something passed between them, something unspoken yet heavy with meaning. She didn't answer. She never had to. Her silence said everything. Darian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet magnetic. "From this moment," he said, his tone decisive, "she serves only me now." Elara froze, her hand tightening slightly around the rag she held. There was a rush of conflicting emotions, fear, curiosity, and something she couldn't quite name. For the first time that night, her control wavered, and she realized that the game had changed. He smiled, sensing the shift. "Don't worry," he murmured. "I'm not asking. I'm declaring." The rain outside had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the neon lights. The city was quiet, almost expectant, as if holding its breath for the story that had just begun. Elara didn't speak, didn't move, but the tension between them crackled like static in the air. Darian left the tavern shortly after, disappearing into the night with the grace of a shadow, but the weight of his words lingered. Elara remained behind, leaning against the counter, her thoughts a storm of uncertainty. She had faced fear many times, but this was different. Darian Moretti was not like the men she had known. He was more dangerous, more commanding, and strangely, more human than she expected. As she closed the tavern for the night, locking doors and turning off lights, she could feel the unspoken promise of the encounter settling into her bones. This was no ordinary man, and she was no ordinary woman. Whatever game had begun between them, it was only starting, and the rules were already shifting. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, dark and alive. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight, echoing like a drumbeat across the rooftops. Elara walked home through the slick streets, her mind replaying every glance, every word. She knew one thing for certain. Her life had changed tonight. And somewhere, in the shadows, Darian watched her from a distance. A predator? Perhaps. A man seeking control? Certainly. But beneath the surface, something more fragile and dangerous stirred. For the first time, he wondered if he had met someone who could challenge him, not with weapons or threats, but with the power of their own will. The night ended with no resolution, only tension. Two forces, equal and opposite, now bound by something neither fully understood. One thing was clear: the city would never be the same, and neither would they. The first step had been taken, and the story, wrapped in shadows, danger, and the spark of something forbidden yet pure, was just beginning. The city streets were quiet in the early hours, slick with rain and dimly lit by flickering neon. Mist rose from the drains, curling around the edges of buildings like pale fingers. Ilara walked swiftly, her coat pulled tightly against the chill. Her mind was a storm of thoughts. Darian Moretti's words from the night before echoed relentlessly in her head. She serves only me now. It wasn't just the audacity of the statement that unnerved her, it was the truth buried in it. In every glance he had cast her way, in every subtle test of her patience, she had felt the pull of a force stronger than fear or curiosity. She had survived every challenge life had thrown at her, yet this man unsettled her in ways she didn't fully understand. The tavern had been a stage, and tonight the city itself seemed to be watching, waiting to see how the next move would unfold. By the afternoon, Darian had made his presence felt again. He appeared at the tavern, though this time with no fanfare. Ilara saw him as she carried a tray of coffee to a corner table. Her instinct was to maintain composure, to treat him as she did any other patron, but her fingers twitched slightly, a reaction she quickly suppressed. Darian's eyes followed her every move. He noticed the slight tightening of her jaw when she poured a cup, the way her back stiffened as he approached. He was not used to being ignored so deliberately, and yet it only drew him closer. "You're impossible," he murmured, leaning lightly against the counter. His voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. Ilara paused but didn't look at him. "I'm just doing my job," she said evenly, her tone neutral. Darian smiled, a slow, calculating curve of his lips. "Your job seems to involve ignoring me." Ilara finished her task and moved toward the kitchen, but he followed, stepping lightly, like a shadow. "You don't understand me," he said. "Most people see what they want to see. You see only what's in front of you." Her back stiffened. It was true. She saw him for what he was, a man of immense power, dangerous yet flawed, a man who had built his empire through fear and skill, and yet beneath that she sensed something else, loneliness, vulnerability, something human he didn't often show. Later that evening, Darian invited her to meet him outside the tavern. His tone was not commanding, not threatening, but there was a magnetism that was impossible to ignore. She hesitated, but curiosity and a strange sense of inevitability drew her forward. They walked through narrow alleyways and deserted streets. The city lights reflected in puddles like scattered gems. For a moment, silence stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with tension. "I've been watching you," Darian said finally, his voice low and steady. "Not in the way most people are watched. I'm interested. Not just in what you do, but in who you are." Ilara stopped and looked at him, her eyes sharp. "And what if I don't want to be seen?" "Then I will keep watching," he said simply. "Because there's something about you, something that refuses to bend. It's rare, beautiful, dangerous." Her heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I've learned long ago that the world is full of people who want to control me. I survive by not letting anyone in." "And yet here I am," he said, taking a step closer, but not pressing. "I am not most people." That night, a masked ball was held in the grand hall of one of Darian's trusted allies. Ilara had been invited, though not as a guest of honor, merely as part of the company he wanted to show off. She entered cautiously, her dress simple but elegant, a sharp contrast to the elaborate gowns and masks around her. She was aware of every glance, every whisper, every subtle appraisal from those who did not understand her place there. Darian watched her from across the room, admiring the way she moved through the crowd without pretense, commanding attention without asking for it. Their eyes met briefly, and he felt a rush of something unfamiliar. Admiration, fascination, perhaps even longing. The night's festivities carried a tense undertone. Ilara's instincts, sharpened by years of survival, were alert to every subtle threat. She noticed men whose eyes lingered too long, gestures that hinted at rivalries beneath the surface, whispers that carried dangerous intentions. And yet, through it all, she moved gracefully, unafraid, with Darian never far from her sight. It was during the ball that danger emerged. A rival faction, seeking to test Darian's control, had infiltrated the gathering. One of their agents made a move to challenge him publicly, intending to embarrass him in front of allies and enemies alike. Ilara sensed it before anyone else. Her instincts kicked in. She intercepted the man with precise timing, stepping between him and Darian. Her voice was calm but authoritative. "This is not the place. Leave now." The rival faltered, thrown off by her sudden intervention. The room seemed to hold its breath. Even Darian, ever composed, was taken aback by her courage. In that moment, he realized that Ilara was not just brave, she was extraordinary. The tension dissolved as the rival backed away, murmuring under his breath as he left the hall. Guests whispered among themselves, casting astonished glances at Ilara. She had acted without fear, without hesitation, and without asking for reward. Darian approached her after the crowd had settled. He took her hand lightly, a gesture both intimate and commanding. "You have no idea what you just did," he murmured. "You could have been in danger, and yet you acted without thinking of yourself. That is remarkable." Ilara withdrew her hand slightly, maintaining her composure. "I did what needed to be done," she said simply. Darian's eyes softened, briefly revealing the man behind the mask of the Mafia boss. "And yet, for the first time I feel something I haven't felt in years. Respect, admiration, perhaps even hope." Ilara didn't respond. She didn't need to. Words were unnecessary when actions spoke louder than speech ever could. After the ball, they walked through the quiet streets again. The city seemed transformed in the moonlight, less threatening, more alive with possibility. "Why do you keep coming after me?" Ilara asked finally, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "I am drawn to what I cannot have," Darian said, his voice low and measured. "You resist me, you challenge me, and that is rare, beautiful, worth pursuing." Ilara's heart raced. She had faced countless challenges in her life, some of them deadly, but nothing had felt like this. Nothing had felt so magnetic, so inevitable. She knew the danger he represented. She knew that to get close to him could mean losing herself entirely, and yet she could not turn away. "You do not understand me," she said. "I am not like the others you encounter. I do not bend to power. I do not fear men, and I certainly do not serve them." Darian paused, considering her words carefully. Then he smiled, a small, almost human smile that softened his dangerous features. "Perhaps not," he said, "but maybe you will learn that some things are worth bending for." Ilara bristled at the thought, but a small part of her, a part she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge, stirred at the promise of connection, of understanding, of being seen without judgment. The following days were a delicate dance between them. Darian orchestrated subtle encounters, a message left at the tavern, a small gesture of protection during the city's darker corners, a simple acknowledgement of her presence that carried weight far beyond words. Ilara maintained her composure, refusing to yield, yet she could not ignore the pull she felt toward him. Each encounter revealed layers she had never considered: the human beneath the Mafia boss, the vulnerability beneath the power, and the possibility of something more than fear and obligation. At night, when she closed the tavern, she would replay every interaction, every word, every glance. And Darian, in his own shadowed world of power and secrecy, would do the same. One evening, as a pale mist rolled in from the river, danger struck again. A messenger arrived with news that rival factions were planning a coordinated attack, one that could threaten both Darian's empire and the fragile trust forming between them. Ilara, sensing the urgency, acted instinctively. She helped coordinate information, guided trusted allies, and used her sharp mind to prevent an ambush before it could occur. Darian observed her, astonished by her brilliance under pressure. She was not merely a survivor, she was a force in her own right, one he could neither ignore nor underestimate. When the threat was finally contained, Darian approached her privately, his expression unreadable. "You've changed everything," he said softly. "Not just for me, but for everyone around us. Your courage, your strength. It is remarkable." Ilara's chest rose and fell with effort to control her emotions. "I do what I must," she said. "Always." Darian's eyes softened, and for a moment, the dangerous aura surrounding him faded. "And yet," he whispered, leaning close, "there is something between us that cannot be ignored. Something inevitable." The city lay in silence, a fragile calm after the storm of the last few days. Rain had fallen again, washing the streets clean, leaving reflections of neon lights in puddles that glimmered like scattered stars. Ilara walked briskly, her coat wrapped tight around her, each step echoing softly on the slick pavement. Her mind was alive with thoughts. The tension between her and Darian Moretti was no longer a distant spark. It had become a flame she could neither ignore nor fully control. Inside the tavern, everything seemed ordinary, yet the air was heavy with anticipation. Darian had left his mark on the place the night before, subtle yet unmistakable, a single glass of whiskey placed neatly at the counter, a sign that he had been there, watching, waiting. Ilara felt the pull again, that strange mixture of curiosity, caution, and something more complicated. That evening, Darian appeared without warning. There was no entourage, no grand entrance, just him, calm, composed, and undeniably magnetic. Ilara served him as she had served him before, but tonight was different. The quiet tension between them was palpable. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his tone almost teasing, but with an undercurrent of something deeper. "I've been busy," she replied simply, careful not to betray the storm of emotions inside her. Darian leaned against the counter, studying her. "Busy surviving, I imagine." "You've survived a lot, haven't you?" Ilara's eyes flicked briefly to his, sharp and wary. "I've learned that the world doesn't wait for anyone. You take what you need to stay alive." He nodded slowly, a small, rare smile crossing his lips. "And yet, somehow, you've managed to stand tall in front of me." For the first time, Ilara felt a flicker of vulnerability. Most people either feared him or tried to please him. She did neither. And now, standing here, she realized that Darian's presence was more than a threat. It was an undeniable force drawing her closer, testing the limits of her resolve. Days passed, each filled with subtle encounters that tested both their boundaries. Darian was patient yet relentless, orchestrating situations where Ilara had to navigate danger, intrigue, and her own feelings. She was constantly aware of him, not as a man to fear, but as someone impossible to ignore. One evening, the city itself seemed to conspire to push them together. A coordinated attack by rival factions threatened not only Darian's empire, but the fragile trust that had begun to form between them. Ilara, instinctively alert, acted before anyone else could. She guided trusted allies, intercepted threats, and ensured that the first strike was neutralized. Darian observed from the shadows, astonished by her skill and courage. She moved with precision, commanding attention without demanding it, protecting lives with intelligence and determination. In that moment, he realized that she was not merely a survivor. She was a force of nature, one he could neither control nor underestimate. After the threat passed, Darian sought her out privately. They met in a quiet courtyard, moonlight spilling over cobblestones like silver dust. The night was still, almost sacred, as if the city itself held its breath. "You've changed everything," he said softly, his voice carrying both awe and something more tender. "Not just for me, but for everyone around us. Your courage, your strength, it is remarkable." Ilara remained composed, her eyes steady. "I do what must be done," she replied. "Always." Darian stepped closer, his presence commanding yet strangely gentle. "And yet, I cannot ignore this. Us. Something has begun between us, whether we choose it or not." Ilara's heart quickened. She had always been careful, guarding herself from attachment, from danger, from men like him. But now, standing under the silver light of the moon, she felt the undeniable pull of connection, a force beyond reason, beyond caution. "You're dangerous," she said quietly, "not just to others, but to me." "And yet," he murmured, "you have never run from danger. Not then, not now." The following night, Darian invited her to a rooftop overlooking the city. The lights shimmered below, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. He gestured for her to stand beside him. "Look at the city," he said, voice low and reflective. "Everything here is built on fear and power. Everyone thinks they know what control is, until they meet someone who cannot be commanded." Ilara gazed down at the streets, her mind tracing the alleys, the hidden dangers, and the people who relied on luck more than skill to survive. "Control is an illusion," she said. "The world is dangerous. You adapt, or you fail. That is all." Darian turned to face her, his eyes intense. "And yet somehow, you've adapted without losing yourself. That is extraordinary." For the first time, the walls between them seemed to blur. Not walls of fear, but walls built from pride, pain, and past wounds. Both of them had lived lives shaped by danger, power, and the constant struggle to survive. And now, standing on that rooftop, they realized that the connection forming between them was not weakness. It was a choice, a mutual recognition of strength. The night's calm was shattered by a sudden noise below, the approach of rival enforcers seeking revenge for the previous attacks. Darian's hand instinctively went to the small knife hidden at his belt, but Ilara stepped forward. "Wait," she said, voice firm. "Let me." Before he could argue, she moved with precision, intercepting the men with swift, controlled actions. She used their own momentum against them, guiding them out of the rooftop courtyard and neutralizing the threat without bloodshed. Darian watched in awe, realizing that her courage was matched only by her intelligence and skill. When the last of the rival men had fled, he approached her. "You are incredible," he said softly, his usual calm replaced with genuine admiration. "I told you," she said quietly. "I do what I must." And yet, in the silence that followed, something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that the bond forming was more than circumstance, more than necessity. It was trust, fragile yet undeniable. Days later, they met in the quiet sanctum of Darian's office. Candles flickered, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. The air was charged with unspoken emotion, the tension of shared danger and the promise of connection. Darian closed the door and approached her. "Ilara," he said softly, "I have lived my life surrounded by power and fear. I have ruled through strength, through intimidation, but with you, I am learning something new, something I have long forgotten." Ilara raised an eyebrow, cautious yet curious. "And what is that?" "Hope," he said simply, "and trust, and the possibility of something real." For the first time, Ilara felt the weight of her own defenses begin to ease. She had survived countless storms, fought countless battles, and protected herself from countless people who sought to control her. But Darian was different. Not because he demanded her submission, but because he had shown her respect, courage, and a willingness to see her as an equal. "You are not like anyone I have met," he continued, "and I do not want to lose what we are building." Ilara took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. She had always guarded herself, but now she realized that to survive alone was not living. To trust, to allow connection. That was bravery of a different kind. The final challenge came unexpectedly. A coordinated strike from a rival faction threatened the city, Darian's empire, and their fragile bond. They faced the danger together, side by side, moving with precision, trust, and unspoken understanding. Ilara anticipated threats before they appeared, guided allies, and ensured that every step was calculated. Darian acted with a rare patience, following her lead when needed, trusting her instincts as much as she trusted his strength. When the danger passed, they stood on the city rooftop, the skyline glowing in the early morning light. Silence stretched between them, a calm born from survival, mutual respect, and unspoken affection. "You were remarkable," Darian said quietly. "I could not have done it without you." Ilara shook her head. "We did it together." Darian smiled, a rare human smile that softened his dangerous features. "Together," he echoed, leaning close. "That is what matters." The city below them began to wake, unaware of the storms that had raged in its shadows, unaware of the bond that had formed between two unlikely souls. Ilara looked at Darian, truly looked at him, and for the first time let herself acknowledge the connection that had grown between them. "You said I serve only you," she murmured, a small, almost playful smile tugging at her lips. Darian's eyes softened. "And I mean it," he said. "Not because I command it, but because I choose it. We choose this, together." The air was charged with something beyond fear or power, something human yet extraordinary. Two people, hardened by the world, had found each other in the shadows, not as master and subordinate, but as equals bound by trust, respect, and something that had begun as tension and defiance and had transformed into connection, perhaps even love.